Hello and welcome to tonight's episode. Now, I'm going to do a Q&A session tonight. I have had some fantastic questions in, and I thought I'm going to talk about them this evening because you might find them interesting. So we're going to cover things like pests, natural fertilizers, short flower stems this year, pivoting, toilets, green manures, and rose lilies. But before all of that, I would like to say a special thank you to Emily, who sent me a comment on Spotify, and she's very excited about my new direction. And Emily, that is exactly the kind of positive energy I really needed to hear. So thank you so much. And also to my fellow year two grower, Melissa, over in the States, totally resonating with everything you said about how you are managing selling in summer and the changes that you're proposing to make. I think we're all looking to make some kind of changes, and it's not a bad thing. We need to be, responsive to things that happen. We can't keep doing what we've always done and expected the same result, especially not this year. It's really shown us where the cracks are and any problems that we've got in our businesses. So it's perfectly okay to chop and change. So questions, on to the questions. What pests have I had this year? Well, I was thinking, I've hardly had any pest problems this year. And then actually, I've had three distinct pest problems. So the first one was pollen beetles. Now, these are really, really tiny little things. And with my eyesight at the moment, very, very tiny. I think they've flown in from the local, we have lots of rapeseed grown around me. And I suspect once they'd finished with all the rapeseed, they came and tootled over to my place. And they were very, very small, but there were lots of them. And they suddenly appeared. And it's something that I hadn't had before. And because I'm still quite new to growing on the field, I feel like a lot of the local pests don't know I'm there. So I've kind of got away with it for a couple of years. But these guys obviously found out and they all moved in. They didn't seem to cause any damage that I could see whatsoever, and I kept checking regularly. There was nothing that I found that I could apply in terms of like a natural product that would just encourage them gently to leave. I don't use any chemicals on the field. I don't use any when I garden, but I'll come back and tell you a bit about my rose lily beetles later, where I have actually used chemicals on them for the first time. I've used any chemicals in about a decade because I was so cross, but I'll tell you about that later. So I looked the pollen beetles up. They don't seem to cause that much damage. I think they can do, but they're more interested in eating pollen rather than actually eating the foliage. So the worst thing they did was just fertilize everything. And then one day they just completely vanished. So the answer to dealing with them on the stems that were going to be for sale was, once I cut the stems, I literally just shook the beetles off and they all fell off. And then the stems were perfectly fine. So there was no damage done and I didn't have to apply any products to them. They were quite well behaved. The aphids, on the other hand, the green fly, they are a significant problem. Now, I get them on the broad beans, but the vegetable garden is quite a long way away from the flowers. And I wasn't too worried about that. As long as the crop isn't impacted, I don't really mind. The only aphids that I've had on the field were about mid-July. And that happened when the sweet peas had pretty much flowered their little socks off, done what they needed to do. And then they were obviously quite weakened, even though they get a feed of, the duck water. That's it. It hasn't got a proper name. It's literally like duck poo water. So they get a couple of bowls of duck poo water thrown on them every day, which really helps them when they're like flowering and getting into the swing of things. And then they're just so exhausted afterwards that they just kind of were weakened. And I think it's at that point exactly that the aphids flew in and just munched them to death. Wasn't an issue because I am saving as much of the seed from this year's sweet peas as I possibly can. As you know, I'm growing King's Ransom, and the seed literally cost a King's Ransom. They were very expensive and numbers were limited. So I thought, well, I'm not going to buy more seed next year. I'm going to harvest my own. So I didn't really mind about that. And I've been watching the plants, and it didn't really get out of control. I mean, the aphids obviously weaken the plant. They make them look rubbish. But as long as it could carry on producing and ripening the seed, that's all that matters. And thank goodness, I mean, this is no, there are three upsides actually to the heat waves and the drought we've had. One is that all the seeds are ripening on the field incredibly, like because we've had no rain since about June. Everything is just bone dry and ripening amazingly. The second good thing is that it's been a great year for beetroot, which has boosted my confidence because it's the first year that I've grown beetroot on any kind of scale. And I've been cutting the tops off and giving them to the chickens, which they have really enjoyed. They love beetroot leaves. And I've been roasting the beetroot and eating it, as well as making that hummus, which was very good. And the third benefit of the heat wave is that the shed roof in my garden got so hot that the the hornets left. So I had a hornet that was nesting in the roof of my greenhouse right where my tap is, which is just typical. So it made watering things quite dicey for a while. She completely left me alone. I didn't have any issues, even though they are enormous and I was quite terrified. But when the heat became too extreme, I think they must have realized that a tin roof was really not an ideal nesting spot. And they left and haven't come back. So that's great. So there have been some upsides to this bizarre summer that we're having. And then the aphids, I haven't done anything about them. I haven't put any sprays or treatments or anything. I've just let them do their own thing. And quite honestly, my attitude's always been, if you can afford to leave some of them on the plant, it's always a good idea because the ladybirds will eventually work out where they are. I don't think they're the smartest tools in the box, the ladybirds. They seem to take their time. It's all very slow. And even when I've relocated ladybirds onto material that's totally covered in aphids, they either go off and have sex with each other instead, or they just seem to eat really slowly, which I kind of don't understand. But there we are. So I've left them, and hopefully it means I'll have a really good, strong ladybird population for next year because they had plenty to eat. And the third insect problem that has been actually a really big problem for me is the lily beetles. These are these really annoying little red beetles that you get on lilies and fritillarias. They're not native to the UK, but they have been here for a while and they've spread across most of the UK now. Probably not up into Scotland, but anyway, they're a significant problem. And they've been in my garden. And as you know, I bought these special, fancy, expensive rose lilies, and I decided to actually grow them in tubs in my garden where I could keep a close eye on them. Thinking about it now, I probably could have taken them to the field because I don't know whether the lily beetles know that I'm up on the field. That probably maybe I'll try that next year. And I have already got lilies in my garden, so I know that there are lily beetles here already. And they cause a bit of damage. It's not usually catastrophic, but it's pretty bad. And these things are so annoying because when you try and catch them, and that's what you have to do, you have to catch them and dispose of them, which is an issue for me because I don't like killing things. So I haven't historically done that. I kind of flick them or knock them off on the floor. Or sometimes when they see me coming, they kind of dive bomb off the lily and they drop onto their backs and their tummies are black. So it's very hard to see them against the compost. And at that point, I think, okay, well, you've made it away. I won't squash you. Anyway, growing these fantastic rose lilies, which are the double ones, so no visible pollen or stamens or anything, so no staining on clothes. You can stick your nose into them to smell them without getting covered. I thought they'd be great for weddings and, safe to have around wedding dresses and all that sort of thing. So I have been having them in the garden in these tubs and I've been taking care of them, and they got totally infested in the lily beetle and it all got completely out of hand. And I was so furious the other day because I've been waiting for these lily flowers to open and it's been looking so promising. And then I think I must have taken my eye off the ball last week. I didn't have a very good week last week. If you're a regular listener, you will know. You'll remember because there were a couple of really, really depressing episodes. So I went out a couple of days ago and I was so furious with these guys. So I went inside and I made up a garlic spray with a spray bottle that I have, a couple of drops of washing up liquid to act as a kind of glue's a strong word, but it kind of helps the liquid to actually stay on the leaves and not just completely wash off. and then all of these garlic granules. Now, I buy jars of dried garlic granules because I find it an absolute fiddle and a faff to buy dried garlic and try and get the skins off and chop them up really small. It's all a bit of a hoo-ha. So I've got onto dried garlic granules, and I just chuck them in absolutely everything that I make. And when I have noodles, which is at the moment because I've completely run out of money, I just sprinkle all these garlic granules on top of the noodles, and it totally takes the dish to another level. One level up, obviously, from total poverty, but there we go. So I made up this bottle of water, a couple of drops of washing up liquid, and some garlic granules. I was very excited. Only the problem was the garlic granules did not dissolve in the water. So I started to spray, and all that happened was it blocked up my spray bottle, and then it stopped working. So I ended up just chucking the whole bottle over all of the foliage. And then all that happened is that these little white granules just stuck on all the leaves, didn't seem to get rid of the lily beetles at all. So then the next day I was even more cross. So I went out with a bottle of my kitchen cleaner, which is a spray bottle. Smells really nice, but obviously full of chemicals. Totally and utterly the wrong thing to do. And I sprayed all the foliage underneath, on the top, not the actual flower bulbs, but the foliage. And do you know what? It did the trick. It did the trick, but I feel enormously guilty. So I'm not putting them up for sale because it goes completely against my ethos, and I feel dreadful. But boy, it didn't half do the job. The lily beetles hated it. They still hate it. I've only seen one on there since, and he got flicked into the undergrowth. So yeah, unfortunate that I had to do that. But honestly, I was so furious. These bulbs were so expensive. And yeah, so I used chemicals. That's terrible, isn't it? Anyway, I've done it now. I have picked a couple of the stems and stripped all the foliage off, but the perfect ones are obviously inside, but there was some damage to some of the other actual flower heads, which is unfortunate, but I can't sell them now because of what I've done. So the lily beetles are a real problem. There is apparently a product called Grazer's G4, which you can buy, which has got a whole load of calcium in it, which is supposed to change the inner structure of the leaves and just make them less tasty. It doesn't actually get rid of the lily beetles. And I've seen various reports of different success on that. So I don't know, maybe it's something I could consider for next year. It kind of depends what else is in the product, but then there's me spraying kitchen cleaner on them, so I can't really talk about chemicals. Another question I had, am I still collecting data? Well, yes, I am collecting data, even though it sounds like I have dropped all the balls and, the train has completely come off the tracks this year and I've been very miserable and grumpy. I am still collecting loads of data. So I am still making a note of how long it takes me to harvest stems and how many stems I cut and for what purpose they go to. So last year I made the mistake of not recording this data, and everything either was sold, in which case I had a record of it, or the stems went in the compost heap, they went in a vase, I gave them away to friends and family. What it meant was I didn't have a record of the yield of the product that I was growing. So I had absolutely no idea how many stems I'd cut from a particular plant or from a square meter or from a particular bed. And that's information that I really wanted to have this year, just to work out what kind of yields I'm getting from the plant. In peak season, it all looks incredibly prolific and amazing and everything. But that's not quite the same as being able to say, oh, I get 20 stems from this plant, or I get 20 stems per square meter. And that's data that I really wanted to know. So I'm still collecting that. I'm still not counting watering time. I kind of just consider that my gift to the business, because it's something that I do when the chickens are having their tea and I have to just stand around and wait for them otherwise. So I don't count that. But what else do I collect? Any other work that I do on the field. So I collect the time it takes, to go things like buy the IBCs or to refill the IBCs, the water tanks, with water. If I do any weeding or deadheading or mulching, anything like that, I'm still recording the time it takes me to do it and the particular crop that I'm doing it on. And I haven't put anything on the laptop all season, actually. Best laid plans and all that slightly go out the winter when it's peak season, but everything is in notebooks. So I've got a notebook up on the field for all the harvesting, and then I've got a notebook for actually how much time I spend doing all of the individual tasks, or how much time my other half spends, so that in theory I could pay him back at the end of the year. And that notebook is in my handbag, and it just gets carried around everywhere so that I can't lose it. Because that's my biggest concern. If I put anything down in the house, I will immediately lose it. So I just carry that notebook around everywhere. I was going to record things on my phone in all these various different places. And the reality is, when you're busy, it's easier just to get a piece of paper and a biro out and write it down on there. And then there's no risk that I will accidentally swipe one way or the other and then lose something. Question about natural fertilizers like nettle tea, compost tea. Well, I'm really into nettle tea. I have made a batch, and it's all bottled up it's actually in a really big jar, and it's labeled very clearly so nothing happens to it. I need to dilute it 1 part nettle tea to 10 parts water and apply it. So that I haven't actually done any feeding this year. In previous years, I did put Tomerite on, but I've stopped doing that. At the moment, it's more important I think, really just to get the water on them rather than worrying about nettle teas. The quality and the vigor of the plants that are doing well doesn't necessitate adding any additional fertilizers. So I'm just leaving the nettle tea ready for when I do need it. The compost tea, I've never made compost tea, but I would like to make it. The only thing is that my compost bins, I've got 3 of them, and they are full of material which is very, very crispy. So I'm not sure how I will get on with making compost tea. I also need to remind myself how to actually make it. The other kind of tea that I really want to make is like a worm tea, not made out of worms, but made out of the poo that the worms make. I would love to have a wormery. I'm kind of building up to that, but I feel a little bit not overwhelmed with all the responsibility, but I just think getting another lot of animals that need taking care of, because the worms do need taking care of, even, all through the year. They need to make sure they're not too cold in the winter, not too hot in the summer. They need to be fed, and it needs to be all the right sort of food. And given that I mostly subsist on noodles at the moment to support this wonderful lifestyle I have, there isn't much human waste, food waste left over to feed the worms. So I don't want to get to a situation where I'm scrabbling around trying to find food for these worms. So I haven't rushed into getting worms, but I have a secret dream to get worms, and also a secret dream, I haven't told anybody this, my family will think I'm mad, to grow black soldier fly larvae. They end up as mealworms or calciworms, which I buy for the chickens, and they love them. I think it's the equivalent of like crisps for them. They go absolutely potty for them. And you can also use the waste that you have. You can feed the black soldier fly larvae with them, and then the chickens have them. And then you kind of end up like with this great big recycling system. But the problem for me is going to be having sensible inputs to go in to feed all these creatures. But that's something that I'm really interested in. Question about why are flower stems so short this year? I thought it was possibly just me struggling with the new area that I had cleared by Nigel, the turf man, last year. And I thought because Nigel stripped the turf, and then I basically just put a bit of chicken deep litter down, but then I didn't do much soil improvement. And obviously the plants that have been in that area have not performed brilliantly this year, with the exception actually of the Ami and the Agrostemma, which didn't care at all. So maybe the soil's not as bad as I thought it was, but everything else has had quite short stems. And there are a couple of reasons. Well, there's a few reasons why. The extreme heat that we've had this year, I mean, I say extreme heat, we've had extreme temperatures this year. So April was very, very cold, like unseasonably cold. So a lot of the seedlings just kind of stopped growing in the greenhouse. And then we went straight into sort of 30-degree heat waves in May, and it's been pretty consistent ever since, as in consistently hot. In the last week or so, we've had temperatures around 27, 28, 24, maybe 25. We're going to have another spike up to about 34 next week. And overall, I think those temperatures definitely had an impact on the rate at which the seedlings were growing. And I was talking to someone a bit about this the other day, and they were saying, oh, well, things like tomatoes love the heat, but they do love the heat, but they can't cope with extreme heat. And my tomatoes growing in my greenhouse, the temperatures in there have been over 40 degrees, even with a couple of panes of glass removed, the door open, the roof window blocked open. Even tomatoes will have their limits, and there are a number of reasons for this, so let me share them with you. Some plants, when it gets too hot, they just get this kind of, well, they know inside themselves, like it's just genetic knowledge, that they have to set seed. So they basically just bolt. So that's what some of the flowers do. Things like my Apollo spinach, as I don't know why I'm talking about the vegetables, but that bolted quite early on. Whereas I've got spinach beet, which I have grow for the chickens, that hasn't bolted at all. So that, I'm actually feeding the chickens with this spinach. I got a few meals out of mine, the Apollo, the fancy stuff, and then it just bolted and it was gone. The same thing happens with the flowers. They just kind of get this message that, oh my goodness, it's time for us to set seeds, so let's flower very quickly. And if they haven't put on enough vegetative growth before they make that decision, then what you get is a flower on a short stem. There's also an issue when temperatures get too warm that growth hormones actually get inhibited in some plants as well. So you don't get this sort of accelerated growth, that the stem does not receive the hormonal signals it needs to receive in order to elongate. And the third problem that you can have is actually with meristem growth. So the meristem is like the main stem, the growing bit of the main stem that comes up. And that will actually just halt in extreme temperatures, and the plant will divert its energy into sheer survival, which is what some of mine have done. I haven't even mentioned my gomphrena to you. That is absolutely hilarious. It's literally about 5 or 6 centimeters tall with the most beautiful flower head on top, also very small. And I've actually seen Instagram videos of people who cut their gomphrena with scythes, and I could use a pair of child's tweezers to remove mine. They are really tiny. I'm going to put a reel on Instagram to show you just how tiny they are, because they're actually really comedy little plants. Very disappointing in those. The first time I've ever grown them, and it's clearly not their year. I had a question: what does my pivot mean for the rest of my growing season? That's a really good question. On the one hand, it's meant that I've taken all of this enormous pressure that I'd put on myself off. So I feel actually quite happy, quite liberated. I don't feel under anywhere near as much pressure as I was a couple of weeks ago. I feel I've made the right decision, and I'm hearing things from other growers that they're also making different decisions. And, the fact that I'd made life so incredibly complicated and time consuming and stressful for myself, really not conducive to a happy life. So in that respect, I feel psychologically so much better. What it means in terms of the field is that, as I told you, I'm starting to cut things back, to pull things out. I'm doing a lot more mulching. I'm making plans for what I'm going to purchase next year. And I'm carrying on with like all the general maintenance. I'm still cutting and selling. I handed over an order to my wedding event florist this morning. She came to pick up some stems from me. So orders are still going out, and I'm still supplying, and I still have stems available. I've got some beautiful stems at the moment. Really, really lovely. So all of that is kind of ticking over, but it's just the pressure that I put myself under to try and sustain these plants, which I couldn't support on the field, that has just all gone. And I'm actually just going to have a far more relaxed end of the season. I'm looking forward to selling the dahlias to see all the parties and events that they go off to. But the pressure has all gone, which is fantastic. I had a question about green manures. So yes, I'm not using any green manures, but I'm going to this winter. I bought some and I'm going to sow them. So when I've cleared the beds down, I'm going to sow the green manures. Obviously, everything is contingent on the weather because there is absolutely no point sowing anything at the moment because we've got no rain in the forecast for at least 10 days. And I keep saying, how many weeks have I said that for? And then the forecast just changes and nothing happens. It really is a pretty unprecedented summer here in the UK. And everybody talks about 1976 as being like the pinnacle year for drought, and it was incredible. I wasn't around for that. I wasn't born for that. But 2026 has absolutely smashed that out of the park. So we're looking at really, you know, I hate to use the word unprecedented because it's awful and everybody's overusing it, but it is one of those years where all records have been beaten. And so there is absolutely no point sowing anything now. I'm going to wait until we've had some rain, the soil's had a really good soaking, and then I will get my green manures down. And final question of tonight, which is a super question, very practical question. So thanks for sending this one in. Do I have a toilet on the field? And the answer is yes, I do. I have a portable toilet, like a little porta potty thing. It looks exactly like the toilet that you would have in your house, which is why I bought it. I didn't want some weird kind of like box that you squat on. Anyway, I wanted a proper looking toilet. And I bought it from Amazon, and it's something that I saw when I went camping many, many, many years ago. And this lady had an actual proper plastic toilet in a tent. It was like a dedicated toilet tent. And I was so impressed because I'd never seen that before. And it was amazing. So I bought one for me. It has a proper seat that you sit on. It has a proper lid, and then it's got a bowl inside that collects whatever you do in it. And it also has a little metal handle on the side so that you can attach a toilet roll to it, which is amazing. So I have that on the field in a private location, which is amazing. And yeah, you've got to have a toilet, really. I really think you've got to have a toilet, especially on a field. I've got hand washing facilities as well, I should point out. I have soap up there and a nail brush. So it is perfectly possible to be clean and tidy up there and comfortable, which is a very important thing. So I'm going to leave it there. No plant profile tonight because I have overdone it on the time a little bit. But I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Do please come back and join me on Tuesday for the next episode. You're always very welcome. And all the very best from me.